was fixing her kitchen. When she said, "At 45, I never expected to feel this way again." There I was, knee-deep in sawdust and regret, staring at what used to be someone's kitchen cabinet when my phone rang. The voice on the other end was warm, but tired, like honey that had been sitting in the sun too long. She said her name was Lisa, and she needed help with what she called a kitchen emergency. I almost laughed because in my line of work, emergency usually means water shooting from pipes or electrical sparks dancing across walls. But something in her voice made me grab my toolbox and promise I'd be there within the hour. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. I've been fixing things for people for 15 years now. Started right out of high school when my dad handed me his old leather tool belt and said, "David, people will always need things fixed. Be the guy who shows up." He was right about that, though he probably didn't expect I'd still be showing up to strangers' houses at 33, single, and wondering if I was fixing everyone's problems except my own. The drive to Riverside took me past the farmers' market where vendors were packing up their Saturday stands. October in Oregon meant the air carried that crisp promise of rain, and the maple trees were showing off in shades of gold and crimson. I'd driven these winding roads so many times, they felt like old friends. Each pothole and curve memorized from years of service calls. My truck, a blue Ford that had seen better decades, rumbled past houses with neat lawns and jack-o'-lanterns grinning from front porches. Lisa's address led me to a craftsman-style house that looked like it had stories to tell. The paint was the color of cream that had aged gracefully, with dark green shutters that had probably been gorgeous 20 years ago. A small front garden struggled against the season, and I could see where someone had tried to tame the overgrown lavender bushes. The porch sagged slightly on one side, and the mailbox leaned like it was tired of holding up all those bills and catalogs. When she opened the door, I understood why her voice had that particular quality. Lisa looked exactly 45, not trying to hide it or apologize for it. Her dark brown hair was pulled back in a practical ponytail, and she wore jeans with paint stains and a flannel shirt that had seen some living. But it was her eyes that caught me. They were the kind of blue that reminded you of late afternoon skies, and they held this mixture of hope and wariness that I recognized from looking in mirrors. "You must be David," she said, stepping aside to let me in. "Thank you for coming so quickly. I know weekends are probably family time." "No family to speak of," I said, then immediately wondered why I'd offered that information to a complete stranger. I mean, just me and the job. She led me through a living room that felt lived in rather than decorated. Books were stacked. On tables, a throw blanket was wadded up on the couch like someone had been reading there recently, and family photos covered the mantel in mismatched frames. The hardwood floors creaked in a friendly way, and everything smelled faintly of cinnamon and coffee. The kitchen was where the real story began. Someone had started a renovation project and apparently given up halfway through. Upper cabinets hung at odd angles, one door completely missing its hinges. The counter was a patchwork of old Formica and newer tile that didn't quite match. But the real problem was the cabinet over the sink, which had partially separated from the wall and was hanging there like a broken promise. "It happened this morning," Lisa explained, wrapping her arms around herself. "I was making coffee, and I heard this cracking sound. The whole thing just started pulling away from the wall. I'm afraid it's going to come down completely." I set my toolbox on the kitchen table and walked over to examine the damage. The cabinet was indeed pulling away, but it wasn't going anywhere immediately. The screws had worked loose over time, probably from years of moisture and the natural settling of the house. It was fixable, definitely, but it would take some time and the right approach. "Good news is, this isn't as bad as it looks," I said, testing the cabinet's stability. "The frame is solid. It's just the mounting that's failed. I can have this secure again in a couple hours." Relief washed over her face. "Really?" "When I called 3 other contractors, they all said I'd need to replace the entire kitchen." "They probably wanted to sell you a whole renovation," I said, pulling out my level and pencil. Sometimes the simple fix is the right fix. As I worked, measuring and marking where new anchor points would go, Lisa busied herself around the kitchen. She made fresh coffee without me asking, and set a cup on the counter where I could reach it. The coffee was perfect, rich and dark without being bitter. I found myself glancing at her as she moved around the space, noticing how she seemed to know exactly where everything was, even in the chaos of the half-finished renovation. "How long have you lived here?" I asked, drilling pilot holes for the new mounting brackets. 12 years, she said. Bought it right after my divorce. Emma, my daughter, was 8 then. Seemed like a good place to start over. There was a story in those words, but I didn't push. People told you what they wanted you to know, usually when they were ready. I'd learned that from years of working in people's homes, seeing their private spaces, and occasionally their private struggles. "Emma's in college now," Lisa continued, and I could hear the pride mixed with loneliness in her voice. "Portland State. She comes home every few weekends, but it's different. Quiet." I nodded, understanding more than she probably realized. Empty nest is tough. "Is it that obvious?" She laughed, but it wasn't entirely happy. "I keep starting projects and not finishing them. Like I begin something thinking it'll fill the time, then I lose momentum halfway through." I looked around the kitchen again, seeing it differently now. The abandoned renovation wasn't about running out of money or time. It was about running out of reasons to finish something that had been started for someone else. "What made you start the kitchen?" I asked, securing the first bracket to the wall stud. Lisa was quiet for a moment, running her finger along the edge of the mismatched countertop. "I used to love cooking, really love it. Not just weeknight dinners, but elaborate Sunday meals, holiday feasts, birthday cakes from scratch. This kitchen was my command center." "Used to?" "Hard to cook for one person with the same enthusiasm you had for 3. She shrugged. "I thought if I updated everything, made it beautiful and modern, maybe I'd fall in love with it again. But then Emma left for school, and suddenly I was standing in this half-demolished room wondering who I was doing it for. I fitted the cabinet back against the wall, testing the alignment. It was solid now, secure. "Maybe you were doing it for you." "Maybe," she said quietly. "I'm not sure I remember how to do things just for me." As I worked on the second mounting point, the front door opened and closed, followed by footsteps and a voice calling, "Mom, whose truck is in the driveway?" A young woman appeared in the kitchen doorway, and I could see Lisa in her face immediately. Same blue eyes, same thoughtful expression, but with the confidence that comes from being 20 and believing the world is full of possibilities. Her dark hair was shorter than her mother's, and she wore the kind of vintage band t-shirt that college students seem to collect. "Emma, this is David," Lisa said. "He's fixing the cabinet that tried to escape this morning." Emma looked from me to the cabinet to her mother. "You finally called someone? I've been telling you to get that fixed for months." I know, Lisa said, and I caught something in her tone. A defensiveness that suggested this wasn't the first time they'd had this conversation. "Hi," Emma said to me, extending her hand with the kind of directness that reminded me of her mother. "Thanks for coming out on a weekend. Mom's been living in terror of that thing falling on her head." Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now, back to the story. "It's not that dramatic," Lisa protested, but she was smiling. "She's been eating cereal for breakfast standing at the other counter because she was afraid to use the sink," Emma continued, clearly enjoying the opportunity to embarrass her mother. I finished tightening the last screw and tested the cabinet one more time. Solid as a rock. "Well, cereal crisis is officially over," I announced. Emma watched me pack up my tools with the kind of curiosity that college students applied to everything. "What else do you fix?" "Pretty much anything that's broken," I said. "Plumbing, electrical, carpentry, appliances. If it's supposed to work and it doesn't, I can usually figure out why." "Cool," she said, and I could tell she meant it. Like a professional problem solver. Something like that. As I prepared to leave, Lisa walked me to the front door. "What do I owe you?" I told her the amount, and she wrote me a check with careful handwriting. "Thank you," she said, "for more than just the cabinet." "Happy to help." I was halfway to my truck when she called after me. "David, that other stuff you mentioned, about fixing things. Do you ever do bigger projects? Like finishing what someone else started?" I turned back. She was standing in the doorway, silhouetted against the warm light from inside her house. "Depends on the project." "The kitchen," she said. "I know I said I lost momentum, but maybe I just needed the right person to help me find it again." Something in her voice made me pause. This wasn't just about cabinets and countertops. "I could take a look, give you some ideas about next steps. Would you? I mean, if you have time. I know you probably have regular clients who keep you busy." I thought about my schedule for the week. A leaky faucet on Tuesday, a squeaky door on Wednesday, the kind of small jobs that paid the bills but didn't exactly set my world on fire. I could come back Thursday evening, after work hours. Take a proper look at what you're working with. That would be wonderful. Her smile was genuine and it changed her whole face. "I'll make dinner. It's the least I can do." As I drove home through the gathering dusk, I found myself thinking about that kitchen and the woman who'd lost her enthusiasm for cooking in it. I thought about empty nests and half-finished projects and the way Lisa had looked when she talked about elaborate Sunday meals. There was a story there, something deeper than cabinets and countertops, and I was curious enough to want to hear the rest of it. My own apartment felt smaller than usual when I got home. 1 bedroom, 1 bathroom, a kitchen the size of most people's closets. Everything in its place because there wasn't much to begin with. I heated up leftover pizza and sat at my 2-person table that had only ever seated one, wondering when I'd stop noticing how quiet my evenings were. I'd been focused on work for so long, building my little handyman business one satisfied, customer at a time, that I'd somehow forgotten to build anything else. Friends had gotten married, moved away, started families. I'd stayed put, reliable David with his truck full of tools and his phone that rang when things broke. It was a good life, an honest life, but sitting there with my reheated pizza, I wondered if it was enough. Thursday couldn't come fast enough. Thursday evening arrived with the kind of October drizzle that made everything look softer around the edges. I'd spent the day replacing a water heater for the Hendersons and unclogging a drain for old Mr. Peterson. Routine jobs that left my mind free to wander back to Lisa's kitchen and the dinner invitation that had been sitting in the back of my thoughts all week. I knocked on her door at 6:30, carrying my more comprehensive toolbox and a small notebook where I'd sketched out some preliminary ideas for kitchen layouts. The door opened before the second knock, and Lisa appeared wearing a navy sweater that brought out her eyes and jeans that looked newer than the paint-stained ones from Saturday. "Perfect timing," she said, stepping aside to let me in. "I just pulled the lasagna out of the oven." The house smelled incredible, like garlic and herbs and something indefinably homey that made my stomach remind me I'd skipped lunch. As we walked toward the kitchen, I noticed changes from my last visit. The living room had been tidied, but not in that frantic way people clean when they're trying to impress someone. It felt more like she'd taken care of the space because she wanted to, not because she had to. The kitchen looked different too. She'd cleared away the construction debris and set the small table by the window with actual plates and cloth napkins. Candles flickered on the counter. Not romantic exactly, but warm and inviting. It struck me that this was probably the first real dinner she'd cooked in this space since Emma left for college. "This looks amazing," I said, and meant it. The lasagna was perfectly golden, and she'd made a salad with what looked like vegetables from someone's garden. Bread was warming in the oven, and 2 glasses of red wine sat waiting on the counter. "I may have gotten a little carried away," Lisa admitted, untying an apron that read, "World's Okayest Mom" in faded letters. "It's been a while since I cooked for someone who might actually appreciate it." We sat down to eat, and I understood immediately why Emma probably missed these dinners. Lisa was one of those natural cooks who seemed to know instinctively how flavors worked together. The lasagna had layers of complexity I'd never tasted in any restaurant, and when I told her so, she blushed like I'd given her the finest compliment. "My ex-husband used to say I went overboard with meals," she said, cutting herself a second piece. "He was more of a grilled cheese and canned soup kind of person. Said all the herbs and fancy ingredients were a waste of money." I paused with my fork halfway to my mouth. "He was an idiot." Lisa laughed, a real laugh that transformed her entire face. "That's exactly what my friend Sarah says. She keeps telling me I should open a restaurant, but that's crazy talk." "Is it?" I asked, "because this is restaurant quality, honestly." She shook her head, but I could see the idea pleased her. "I'm 45 years old, David. People don't start restaurant careers at 45. Says who? That stopped her. She looked at me with those blue eyes, and I could see her considering the possibility, maybe for the first time in years. I don't know. Society? Common sense? My ex-husband's voice in my head telling me to be practical? Well, your ex-husband thought herb lasagna was too fancy, so maybe his opinion isn't worth much. We talked through dinner about food and cooking, and I learned that Lisa had actually studied culinary arts briefly in her 20s before she got married and practical life took over. She told me about a food blog she'd started and abandoned, about cooking classes she'd taught informally for neighbors, about the elaborate themed dinner parties she used to throw before her marriage fell apart. I had this dream once, she said, swirling wine in her glass. A small cafe, nothing fancy, comfort food made with real ingredients. The kind of place where people would come for the pot roast and stay for the conversation. I even had a name picked out. What was it? The Copper Kettle. She smiled at the memory. There was this antique copper kettle in my grandmother's kitchen that I inherited. It sits in my pantry now, gathering dust. After dinner, I pulled out my notebook, and we spread the sketches across the table. I'd drawn 3 different layout options for finishing her kitchen renovation, each one designed around the idea of someone who really loved to cook. Lisa studied them with the focused attention of someone seeing possibilities she hadn't imagined. This one, she said, pointing to the design that opened up the space between the kitchen and dining room, with the island in the center for prep work. That's my favorite too, I admitted. You'd have enough counter space to really spread out, and the island could seat 3 or 4 people. Good for when Emma brings friends home. Lisa traced the lines of the drawing with her finger. How long would something like this take? I considered the scope of the work. Working evenings and weekends, maybe 6 weeks for the major stuff. Cabinets, countertops, flooring. The detail work might take a little longer. And cost? I gave her a rough estimate, watching her face carefully. It wasn't cheap, but it wasn't unreasonable either, especially for the quality of work I was envisioning. She was quiet for a long moment, and I could almost see her calculating numbers in her head. I have some money saved, she said finally, from the divorce settlement. I've been sitting on it for 2 years, telling myself I should be responsible, and put it toward Emma's college or home repairs or something sensible. And now? Now I'm thinking maybe being sensible is overrated. She looked up at me. If I said yes, when could you start? Next week, if you want. I can order materials this weekend. Something shifted in her expression, a decision being made in real time. Let's do it. We shook hands across the table, and I felt the calluses on her palm from years of gardening and household work. Her handshake was firm, confident, the handshake of someone who'd made up her mind about something important. Over the next hour, we walked through the kitchen together, and I explained each phase of the renovation process. Lisa asked intelligent questions and made suggestions that showed she'd been thinking about this longer than she'd admitted. When we talked about the island design, her eyes lit up as she described how she'd use the space for rolling out pasta dough or kneading bread. I used to make all our bread from scratch, she said, running her hand along the counter where the island would go. Emma loved helping when she was little. She'd stand on a step stool right here, covered in flour from head to toe. You could do that again, I said, when she comes home from college. Maybe. Lisa's voice was soft with memory. Though I suppose I could make bread just for me, too. As I packed up my tools and sketches, Lisa walked me to the door again. The evening had grown properly dark, and the porch light cast a warm circle around us. Thank you, she said, for dinner, for the conversation, for making this feel possible. Thank you for the best meal I've had in months, I replied, and for trusting me with your kitchen. She hesitated for a moment, then said, David, can I ask you something personal? Sure. Are you happy? With your life, I mean. Working alone, no family. Does it feel like enough? The question caught me off guard, probably because I'd been asking myself the same thing lately. Most days, I said honestly. But sitting in your kitchen tonight, talking about dreams and renovations and the future, it felt like something was missing from my routine. What? Connection, I guess. Purpose beyond just fixing what's broken. Lisa nodded like she understood exactly what I meant. That's how I've felt for 2 years. Like I was just maintaining instead of building towards something. And now? Now I feel like maybe it's time to build again. I drove home through the quiet streets of Riverside, past houses where families were settling in for the evening, past the closed shops and the farmers' market pavilion that would come alive again on Saturday. My truck's heater worked overtime, against the October chill, and the radio played some old song about second chances that seemed too perfectly timed to be coincidental. At home, I spread Lisa's kitchen sketches across my coffee table and studied them by lamplight. This wasn't just another renovation job. This was someone's dream taking shape. Someone's decision to bet on themselves after years of playing it safe. I found myself invested in a way that had nothing to do with professional pride, and everything to do with wanting to see Lisa's eyes light up the way they had when she talked about making bread from scratch. I called my supplier first thing Friday morning and placed orders for cabinets, countertops, and flooring. Premium materials, the kind that would last decades and age beautifully. When the sales rep quoted delivery times, I negotiated for rush service, even though it meant smaller profit margins for me. Some projects were about more than money. Friday afternoon, I stopped by Lisa's house to drop off paint samples and cabinet hardware options. Emma answered the door, home for the weekend, and her face broke into a grin when she saw me. The kitchen. "Guy!" she said. "Mom's been talking about you nonstop. David this, David that. David thinks we should do this with the island." "Emma!" Lisa's voice carried from the kitchen, mortified. "It's true," Emma continued, clearly enjoying herself. "She's been humming while she cooks. I haven't heard her hum in years." Lisa appeared in the hallway, flour in her hair and embarrassment coloring her cheeks. "Don't listen to her. She's been away at college too long and forgotten her manners." "I'm just saying," Emma grinned. "It's nice to see you excited about something again." We spent an hour going through material choices, Emma offering opinions, and Lisa gradually relaxing into the planning process. At one point, Emma pulled me aside while Lisa was examining tile samples. "Thank you," she said quietly. "For what?" "For seeing her. Really seeing her. Most people just see a divorced mom in her 40s and make assumptions. But you look at her like she's interesting, like she has things worth discovering." "She does." Emma smiled. "I know. I'm glad you know it too." That evening I found myself working on detailed drawings of Lisa's kitchen renovation, sketching and re-sketching until every detail was perfect. I wanted this project to exceed her expectations. Wanted the finished space to feel like a gift she'd given herself rather than just another home improvement. But more than that, I wanted to be part of her story. For the first time in years, I was excited about Monday morning, excited about the work ahead, excited about the possibility of helping someone build something beautiful. And if I was honest with myself, I was excited about the woman who made incredible lasagna and dreamed of copper kettles and wasn't afraid to shake hands on a new beginning. The renovation would start Monday, but something told me the real transformation had already begun. Monday morning started with sledgehammer therapy. There's something deeply satisfying about demolition work, especially when you're tearing down walls that someone else wants gone. Lisa had taken the day off from her job at the local library to oversee the start of the renovation, and she stood in the doorway wearing safety glasses and a smile that suggested she was enjoying the destruction more than she'd expected. "Are you sure this wall isn't load-bearing?" she asked for the third time as I positioned the sledgehammer. "Positive," I said, tapping the drywall. "It's just a partition wall from when someone tried to make the kitchen feel more closed in. We're opening it back up to how it was meant to be." The first swing sent a satisfying crack through the plaster, and Lisa actually cheered. By noon, we'd opened up the space between the kitchen and dining room, and the transformation was already dramatic. Light poured in from windows that had been blocked, and the whole house felt bigger, more connected. "Oh my God," Lisa breathed, standing in the newly expanded space. "It's like the house can breathe again." We worked well together, Lisa proving to be surprisingly handy with a reciprocating saw and showing no fear of getting dirty. She'd tied her hair back with a bandana and wore work clothes that had seen better days. But there was something beautiful about watching her attack the renovation with such enthusiasm. Every wall we removed, every old fixture we hauled out seemed to lift her spirits higher. "I can't believe I waited 2 years to do this," she said, hauling a piece of old drywall to the dumpster I'd had delivered. "Sometimes we need the right motivation," I replied. though I was beginning to suspect her motivation had less to do with the kitchen and more to do with reclaiming something she'd lost about herself. By Wednesday, we'd stripped the space down to the studs and were starting the rough electrical work. That's when Tom showed up. I was running new wire for the island outlets when I heard voices from the living room. Lisa's tone shifting from relaxed to tense in the span of a sentence. I couldn't make out words, but the change in atmosphere was unmistakable. I kept working, but I was listening. "Lisa, this is insane," a man's voice said, loud enough that I could hear it clearly now. "You're 45 years old, tearing apart your kitchen for some fantasy about becoming a chef." "It's not a fantasy, Tom," Lisa replied, her voice steady but strained. "And it's my kitchen, my money, and my decision." "What about Emma's college fund? What about being responsible?" "Emma's college is paid for, and I've been responsible for 20 years. Maybe it's time I did something for myself." I heard footsteps moving toward the kitchen, and a moment later a man appeared in the doorway. Tom was tall and thin, wearing an expensive-looking suit that seemed out of place in the construction zone. His hair was perfectly styled, and he had the kind of smooth confidence that came from never doubting he was the smartest person in the room. "And who's this?" Tom asked, looking at me like I was a piece of furniture that had been placed incorrectly. "This is David," Lisa said, appearing behind him. "He's the contractor doing the renovation." Tom extended his hand with the kind of grip that was designed to intimidate. "Tom Patterson, Lisa's ex-husband." I shook his hand, matching his pressure, without escalating it. "David Clark, nice to meet you." "How much is she paying you for all this?" Tom asked, gesturing at the demolished kitchen. "That's between Lisa and me," I said evenly. Tom's eyebrows rose slightly. "I'm just looking out for her financial well-being. Lisa has a tendency to get carried away with projects." "I'm standing right here," Lisa said, her voice sharp. "And I'm perfectly capable of managing my own finances." "Like you managed them during our marriage?" Tom shot back, and I saw Lisa flinch. Something hot flared in my chest, but I kept my voice calm. Maybe this conversation would be better had privately. "Maybe," Tom said, turning his attention back to me. "You should finish your work and stop encouraging her delusions." "Tom." Lisa's voice was quiet but firm. "You need to leave." "I'm trying to help you, Lisa. This whole thing is going to be a disaster, and you'll be left with a house you can't afford and a kitchen that doesn't work. Get out." Lisa's voice was stronger now. "Right now." Tom looked like he wanted to argue further, but something in Lisa's expression stopped him. He straightened his tie and headed for the door, pausing to look back at both of us. "When this falls apart," he said, "don't come crying to me for help." The front door slammed, leaving Lisa and me standing in the ruins of her kitchen. She was breathing hard, her hands clenched into fists at her sides, and I could see tears threatening at the corners of her eyes. "I'm sorry," she said. "You shouldn't have had to witness that." "Don't apologize," I said. He was out of line. Lisa sank onto the step stool we'd been using as makeshift seating. "He does that. Shows up whenever I'm trying to change something about my life and tells me all the reasons it won't work. Why do you let him in?" She was quiet for a moment. "Emma, he's still her father, and she wants us to get along. But also..." She paused, searching for words. For so long, he was the voice in my head telling me what was practical, what was realistic. Sometimes I still hear him even when he's not here. I set down my wire strippers and sat on a crate across from her. "What does your voice tell you?" "My voice?" "The one that's not his. The one that decided to renovate this kitchen and cook incredible dinners and shake hands on new beginnings." Lisa looked around the demolished space, and slowly her expression shifted. "My voice says this is the first time in years I've felt like myself." "Then maybe that's the only voice that matters." She smiled, and it was like watching sunrise after a long night. "You're right. He's wrong about this falling apart. I won't let it." The rest of the week went smoothly, but I could see Tom's visit had rattled Lisa more than she wanted to admit. She second-guessed decisions she'd been confident about, questioned expenses she'd approved, and generally seemed to be fighting against some internal dialogue that sounded suspiciously like her ex-husband. Friday evening, as we cleaned up the worksite, Emma called. "Hey, Mom, I could hear her voice through the phone's speaker. Dad called me. He said you're having some kind of midlife crisis and wasting money on a kitchen renovation. Lisa's face fell. Emma, I can explain. Mom, stop. I told him he was being ridiculous. I've seen the photos you sent, and it looks amazing. Plus, you sound happier than you have in forever. Relief flooded Lisa's expression. Really? Really? Dad's just mad because you're doing something without asking his permission first. Ignore him. After Emma hung up, Lisa was quiet for a while, sweeping up dust and debris with more focus than the task required. Finally, she looked up at me. Can I ask you something? Sure. Do you think I'm having a midlife crisis? I considered the question seriously. I think you're having a midlife awakening. There's a difference. What's the difference? A crisis is when you panic about getting older and make impulsive decisions to feel young again. An awakening is when you realize you're not done growing and decide to invest in who you're becoming. Lisa leaned on her broom handle. Which one includes renovating your kitchen and fantasizing about opening a restaurant? Depends. Are you doing it because you're afraid of being 45, or because you're excited about what 45 might look like? She thought about that. The second one. Then it's an awakening. Saturday morning brought Mrs. Rodriguez from next door, carrying a covered casserole dish and wearing the expression of someone on a mission. Elena Rodriguez was somewhere in her 70s, with silver hair braided down her back and the kind of presence that suggested she'd seen enough of life to have opinions about all of it. Mija, she said to Lisa, I brought you lunch. Construction work makes people hungry. The casserole turned out to be some kind of chicken and rice dish that smelled like heaven and tasted even better. Mrs. Rodriguez insisted we all sit down and eat together, even though I protested that I didn't want to intrude. You're not intruding, she said firmly. You're helping my neighbor, which makes you family. As we ate, Mrs. Rodriguez studied the renovation progress with the eye of someone who'd probably overseen a few construction projects in her time. Good work, she pronounced. But why you tear down this wall and not that one? I explained the layout changes and she nodded approvingly. When Lisa mentioned her dream of possibly opening a small cafe someday, Mrs. Rodriguez's eyes lit up. Aye, that would be wonderful. This neighborhood needs good food. All we have is that fast place on the corner that tastes like cardboard. It's just a dream, Lisa said quickly. I don't know if I'd ever actually do it. Why not? Mrs. Rodriguez asked. You cook better than my own mother, God rest her soul, and you need something to do with your time now that Emma's grown. It's complicated. Starting a business at my age, with no real experience. Experience! Mrs. Rodriguez waved her hand dismissively. You think the man who started the grocery store down the street had experience? You think I had experience when I started my garden, and now I sell vegetables to half the neighborhood? You learn by doing. After Mrs. Rodriguez left, Lisa was thoughtful. She makes it sound so simple. Maybe it is simpler than you think, I said. Not easy, but simple. What's the difference? Simple means straightforward. You want to cook for people, so you find a way to cook for people. Easy would mean it happens without effort or risk. That afternoon, while I worked on framing for the new island, Lisa disappeared into the house and returned with a box I hadn't seen before. Inside were notebooks, recipe cards, magazine clippings, and what looked like a business plan written in her careful handwriting. I actually researched it, she admitted, pulling out a folder thick with papers. 2 years ago, after the divorce was finalized, I looked into commercial kitchen requirements, business licenses, startup costs, everything. I stopped hammering to look at her research. It was thorough, professional, the work of someone who'd taken the idea seriously. This is impressive, I said. You really thought it through. And then I chickened out, filed it all away and told myself it was just a silly dream. What changed your mind about the silly part? Lisa sat on the floor next to the box, running her fingers over the papers. This kitchen. Remembering what it feels like to build something instead of just maintaining what's already there. So what's stopping you now? She was quiet, for a long moment. Fear, mostly. Fear that Tom's right and I'll fail. Fear that I'm too old to start over. Fear that I'll invest everything and discover I'm not as good as I think I am. And if you don't try, Then I'll definitely never know. Sunday evening, Emma came home for the weekend and walked into the construction zone with wide eyes. The transformation was dramatic enough that she stopped in the doorway and stared. "Holy shit, Mom," she said, then immediately clapped her hand over her mouth. "Sorry. Holy crap. This is incredible." Lisa beamed. "You like it?" "Like it? I love it. It's like a real kitchen, the kind people have in magazines." Emma walked around the space, taking in the new openness, the framed walls that would soon hold custom cabinets. "And David's doing all this?" "David's doing all this," Lisa confirmed. Emma looked at me with something that might have been approval. "Nice work." That evening, the three of us ordered pizza and ate it sitting on the living room floor, the demolished kitchen visible through the new opening between rooms. Emma told us about her classes, her roommates' questionable dating choices, and her plans for spring break. But I noticed she kept looking back at the kitchen and at her mother's face when Lisa talked about the renovation. "Mom," Emma said during a lull in conversation, "you seem different." "Different how?" "Happier. More like yourself, if that makes sense." Lisa smiled. "It makes perfect sense." Later, as Emma headed upstairs to her old room, she paused and looked back at us. "David? Yeah? Thanks for making her happy." After she was gone, Lisa and I sat in comfortable silence, surrounded by the controlled chaos of renovation. Tomorrow we'd start installing the new electrical fixtures. Next week, the cabinets would arrive. The project was moving forward exactly as planned, but I was beginning to realize that somewhere along the way, this had stopped being just about fixing Lisa's kitchen. We were building something together, something that felt bigger than the sum of its parts. And for the first time in my adult life, I was working on a project that I didn't want to finish. The cabinets arrived on a Tuesday that felt more like the beginning of something than the middle of a renovation project. Lisa stood in her driveway at 7 in the morning, coffee mug in hand, watching the delivery truck navigate the narrow street. She'd taken another day off work, claiming she wanted to supervise the installation, but I could see something else in her eyes. Anticipation mixed with nervousness, like someone about to take a test they'd studied for, but weren't sure. They'd pass. "They're beautiful," she said as we unpacked the first cabinet box, running her hand over the smooth cherry wood finish. "Better than I imagined." The installation went smoothly until Jake, my occasional business partner, showed up around noon. Jake was good people, reliable when he wasn't distracted. But he had opinions about everything and a tendency to share them whether you asked or not. He took one look at the high-end cabinets and let out a low whistle. "Damn, Dave, you're going all out on this one," he said, loud enough for Lisa to hear from the next room where she was unpacking hardware. "What's she paying you? Double your usual rate?" I shot him a warning look, but Jake was already examining the cabinet specifications. "Custom soft close hinges, solid wood construction, dovetail joints. This is serious money, man." "It's quality work," I said quietly, hoping he'd take the hint. "No doubt, but for a kitchen renovation, most people go with the contractor-grade stuff from the big box stores. This is like professional chef-level equipment." Lisa appeared in the doorway, and I could see she'd heard enough to understand what Jake was implying. That she was overspending, that she was naive about construction costs, that maybe she didn't understand what she was getting into. "Is there a problem with the cabinets?" she asked, her voice carefully neutral. Jake, oblivious to the tension he'd created, grinned. "No problem at all. These are top shelf, literally. I'm just impressed that Dave convinced you to go with the premium line." "David didn't convince me of anything," Lisa said, and there was steel in her voice now. "I chose these cabinets because I want a kitchen that will last 30 years, not 5. "Hey, no judgment," Jake said, raising his hands. "Your money, your choice. I just hope the rest of the house is worth the investment." After Jake left to pick up supplies, Lisa was quiet. She helped me hang the upper cabinets, but the easy conversation we'd developed over the past weeks was strained. Finally, as we were checking the alignment of the third cabinet, she spoke. "Was he right? Am I overspending on this?" I paused, level in hand. "What do you think?" "I think I'm tired of people assuming I don't know what I'm doing with my own money." "Then you have your answer." Lisa smiled, but it was complicated. It's not that simple though, is it? What if Tom is right, and this is all just an expensive way to avoid dealing with my real problems? What are your real problems? She was quiet for a moment, steadying the cabinet while I marked the mounting points. Loneliness, I guess. Fear of getting older alone. The feeling that my best years are behind me. And you think a kitchen renovation is going to fix those things? No, she said. But I think learning to invest in myself again might help. We worked in comfortable silence after that, the rhythm of installation soothing away the tension Jake had introduced. By evening, half the cabinets were hung, and the kitchen was starting to look like the space we'd envisioned. Lisa made sandwiches for dinner, and we ate them standing at the temporary counter, admiring our progress. "David?" Lisa said as we cleaned up. "Can I ask you something personal?" "Sure." "Have you ever been married?" The question caught me off guard. "Once, almost." "What happened?" I thought about Sarah, about the engagement that ended 6 months before the wedding, about the fights that started over small things and grew into fundamental disagreements about what we wanted from life. She wanted someone who was going places, I said finally. Someone with ambition, big plans, a career that looked impressive at cocktail parties. I was happy fixing things and building with my hands. That doesn't sound like a character flaw. It wasn't, but it wasn't enough for her either. Lisa nodded slowly. Tom used to say I had no ambition. He meant it as criticism, but maybe he was right. Maybe I was just content. There's nothing wrong with being content. Except when content becomes stuck, she said. When you're so afraid of wanting more that you stop wanting anything at all. Wednesday brought the countertop installation, and with it, a crisis that threatened to derail everything we'd built. The granite arrived with a crack running through the center of the main piece, a flaw that hadn't been visible in the warehouse but was glaringly obvious once we tried to position it. "Can you fix it?" Lisa asked, staring at the damaged stone. I ran my finger along the crack. It was deep, structural, not something that could be repaired. "We need a replacement piece." "How long will that take?" 3 to 4 weeks for new fabrication. Lisa's face fell. "But Emma's coming home next weekend for fall break. I wanted to have it finished. Wanted to cook for her in the new kitchen." The disappointment in her voice was crushing. This wasn't just about missing a deadline. It was about missing a moment she'd been planning, a celebration of what we'd accomplished together. I pulled out my phone and called every stone supplier within 100 miles, hoping to find a piece that matched and was available immediately. The fourth call was the charm. A supplier in Portland had a remnant piece from a canceled order, close enough in color and pattern that most people wouldn't notice the difference. The only problem was, they needed it picked up that afternoon, and Portland was a 3-hour drive, each way. "I'll go," I said to Lisa. "We can have it installed by Friday." "David, that's 6 hours of driving for a piece of granite. It's not worth it." "Yes, it is." Something in my voice made her look at me more carefully. "Why?" Because I'd seen the way her face lit up when she talked about cooking for Emma in the finished kitchen. Because this project had become about more than renovation somewhere along the way. Because I was falling for a woman who deserved to have her dreams come true on schedule. "Because it matters to you," I said. I left for Portland at 2 in the afternoon, my truck loaded with moving blankets and straps to transport the granite, safely. The drive gave me time to think about what was happening between Lisa and me, about how a simple kitchen job had become something I looked forward to every day. My phone rang as I was loading the granite at the supplier's warehouse. Lisa's name on the screen. "How did it go?" she asked. "Perfect match. I'll be back by 8. "David, I can't thank you enough for this." "You don't need to thank me." "Yes, I do. You didn't have to drive 6 hours for my granite, but you did. That means something." The drive back was easier, knowing I had what we needed to finish the job. But somewhere around Salem, my truck started making a noise it had never made before, a grinding sound from the engine that suggested expensive problems ahead. I nursed it to the nearest exit and called the one mechanic I knew who might still be open. "Timing belt," Mike at Mike's Auto said after looking under the hood. "She's done for the night. I can fix it, but not until tomorrow." I called Lisa to explain the situation, expecting disappointment but finding understanding instead. "Stay in Portland tonight," she said. Find a hotel, get some rest. The granite will be here when you get back. But your deadline will work out, however. It works out. You've already gone above and beyond. I found a motel near the mechanic shop and spent the evening in a room that smelled like industrial carpet cleaner, thinking about the woman who'd told me not to worry about her deadline after I'd driven 3 hours to meet it. This wasn't just about customer service anymore. This was about wanting to see Lisa happy, wanting to be part of her success, wanting to matter in her life the way she was starting to matter in mine. Thursday morning, Mike had my truck running by 10, and I was back in Riverside by 1 in the afternoon. Lisa met me in the driveway, wearing work clothes and a smile that made the previous day's hassles seem trivial. "My hero returns," she said, helping me unload the granite. "How much do I owe you for the road trip?" "Nothing. It's part of the service." "David, you drove 6 hours and spent a night in a motel. That's not part of any service." We carried the granite into the house together, and I could see she was right about the color match. Close enough that you'd have to look carefully to notice any difference. By evening, we had it installed and polished, the kitchen finally taking its final form. Lisa ran her hands over the smooth surface, her expression something between wonder and satisfaction. "It's perfect." "Almost perfect," I corrected. "Still need to install the backsplash and finish the trim work." "David." "Yeah?" "Thank you. Not just for the granite run, but for all of this. For seeing what this could be when I couldn't see it myself." We were standing close together in the nearly finished kitchen, close enough that I could smell her perfume, could see the flecks of gold in her blue eyes. For a moment, it felt like something was about to happen, some acknowledgement of what had been building between us for weeks. Then the front door opened, and Emma's voice called out, "Mom, I came home early to see the big reveal." Emma's reaction to the finished kitchen was everything Lisa had hoped for. She walked through the space with wide eyes, touching surfaces, opening cabinet doors, running water at the new sink just to watch it flow. "This is incredible," she said. "It's like something from a magazine, but better because it actually feels like our house." Lisa beamed, and I understood that this moment, watching her daughter discover the transformed space, was worth every hour of work, every problem we'd solved, every compromise we'd navigated. "David did most of the work," Lisa said. "I just pointed at things and said, 'I like that.'" "That's not true," I protested. "This was your vision from the beginning." Emma looked between us with the sharp awareness that college students seemed to develop about adult relationships. "So what's next? Are you going to cook us dinner in your fancy new kitchen, Mom?" "Actually," Lisa said, and something in her tone made both Emma and me pay attention, "I have an announcement." She walked to the new island, pulled out a folder I recognized as her restaurant research, and spread the papers across the granite surface. "I've decided to take the leap. I'm going to open a small cafe. Nothing huge, just a place where people can get real food made with care. I'm calling it the Copper Kettle." Emma's shriek of excitement could probably be heard 3 houses away. She launched herself at Lisa, hugging her with the enthusiasm of someone who'd been waiting years for her mother to dream big again. "Mom, this is amazing. When? Where? Can I help?" "I've been looking at locations," Lisa said, pulling out photos and lease agreements. "There's a space downtown, next to the bookstore. It needs work, but it has good bones." I studied the photos over Emma's shoulder. The space was small but well-positioned, with large windows and the kind of character that couldn't be faked. It would need renovation, new equipment, permits, licensing. It was a massive undertaking. "What's your timeline?" I asked. 6 months if I can get financing. 8 months to be safe, and you'll need help with the build-out." Lisa looked at me carefully. "Are you offering?" The question hung in the air between us, loaded with implications beyond construction and permits. She was asking if I wanted to be part of her next chapter, if I was willing to invest in her dream the way she'd invested in herself. "I'm offering," I said. Friday night, we celebrated the kitchen completion with dinner cooked on the new stove, served on the new island, cleaned up in the new sink. Lisa had made her grandmother's pot roast recipe, and it was everything I'd imagined comfort food could be. Emma regaled us with stories from college. Lisa shared details about her cafe plans, and I found myself thinking that this felt remarkably like home. After Emma went to bed, Lisa and I sat on the front porch with wine, and the comfortable silence of people who'd worked hard together and succeeded. The October air was crisp enough for sweaters, and the porch light cast a warm circle around us. "I have something to tell you," Lisa said. "Good something or bad something?" "Good something, I hope." She turned to face me. "At 45, I never expected to feel this way again." "What way?" "Hopeful, excited about the future. Like maybe my best years aren't behind me after all." She paused, and in that pause I could feel the weight of everything we'd built together, not just the kitchen but the connection that had grown alongside it. "And I never expected to meet someone who would see me the way you do," she continued. "Someone who would drive 6 hours for granite and stay up late talking about dreams and make me feel like taking risks is worth it. Lisa, I'm falling. For you, David. And I know that complicates everything. The cafe project, and our working relationship, and probably a dozen other things I haven't thought of yet. But I needed you to know." I set down my wine glass and turned to face her fully. "It doesn't complicate anything." No. Because I'm falling for you too." When she kissed me, it was soft and certain, like a question that had finally found its answer. We sat there on her porch, under the light I'd fixed all those weeks ago. And I realized that somewhere along the way I'd stopped just fixing things in Lisa's house and started building a life I wanted to be part of. The kitchen. Renovation was finished, but everything else was just beginning. 3 months later, I stood in what would soon become the Copper Kettle, watching Lisa direct the placement of restaurant equipment with the confidence of someone who'd found her calling. The space had been gutted and rebuilt from the ground up, transformed from a tired storefront into something warm and inviting. Exposed brick walls, reclaimed wood floors, and windows that let in enough natural light to make everything glow. "The espresso machine goes against the back wall," Lisa called to the delivery crew, consulting the layout plans we'd drawn together on countless evenings. "And please be careful with it. That thing cost more than my first car." Emma sat at one of the new tables, laptop open, designing the cafe's website between bites of her mother's experimental scone recipes. She'd switched her major to business management after Lisa announced the cafe plans, claiming she wanted to help run the family empire. The family empire currently consisted of one unfinished restaurant and a mountain of permits, but Emma's enthusiasm was infectious. "Mom, you need to see this," Emma said, turning her laptop around. "I set up the social media accounts, and we already have 200 followers just from the construction photos." Lisa wiped flour from her hands and leaned over Emma's shoulder to look at the screen. Her face lit up at the comments from neighbors and strangers alike, all expressing excitement about the upcoming opening. "Look at this one," Emma pointed to a comment. "Mrs. Rodriguez says she's bringing her entire book club for the grand opening, and this person wants to know if you'll cater their wedding." "We haven't even opened yet," Lisa laughed, but I could see the pleasure in her expression. The community support had been overwhelming from the moment word got out about her plans. The past 3 months had been a whirlwind of permits and inspections, equipment purchases, and staff interviews. Lisa had quit her library job to focus on the cafe full-time, a decision that terrified and exhilarated her in equal measure. I'd taken on fewer outside projects to help with the build-out, and somewhere along the way, we'd become genuine partners in both business and life. "David, can you look at the walk-in cooler?" Lisa called. "The temperature seems off." I made my way to the back of the kitchen, past the 6-burner stove and the prep tables that would soon be covered with Lisa's creations. The walk-in cooler was running, but the digital display showed it was struggling to maintain the right temperature. A quick check revealed a loose connection in the electrical panel, easily fixed with the right tools. "Just a wiring issue," I reported back. "Give me 20 minutes. As I worked, I could hear Lisa and Emma discussing the menu for the 100th time, debating whether to include Lisa's famous pot roast alongside the lighter fare she'd planned. These conversations had become the soundtrack of our days, the careful planning of someone who wanted everything to be perfect. "What about a weekly special?" Emma suggested. "Something that changes every Wednesday, gives people a reason to come back regularly." "That's actually brilliant," Lisa said. "Comfort food Wednesdays. Pot roast, meatloaf, chicken, and dumplings, the kind of food that makes people feel at home." I smiled as I tightened the electrical connections. Lisa had found her voice in this space, the confidence that had been buried under years of other people's expectations. She moved through the kitchen like she'd been born to it, tasting and adjusting seasonings with the instinct of someone who understood food at a molecular level. The front door chimed, and I heard a familiar voice that made my stomach tighten. Tom had arrived for his weekly check-in, a ritual he'd established despite Lisa's clear messages that his input wasn't welcome. "How's the money pit coming along?" Tom asked, his voice carrying the particular tone he reserved for conversations about Lisa's impractical dreams. "It's coming along perfectly," Lisa replied, her voice steady. "We open in 2 weeks." 2 weeks? Lisa, are you sure you're ready? Running a restaurant isn't like cooking dinner for your family. The failure rate for new restaurants is astronomical. I finished with the cooler and made my way back to the dining area, where Tom stood examining the new tables with the expression of someone calculating costs. He nodded at me with the bare politeness he'd maintained since our first meeting. "David. Still enabling this fantasy, I see." "Still helping Lisa build her dream," I corrected. Tom's laugh was sharp. "Dreams don't pay bills. When this fails, and it will fail, she'll be stuck with a lease she can't afford and equipment she can't sell." "Dad, stop." Emma's voice was firm. "You've been predicting disaster for 3 months, and everything Mom said would happen has happened. Maybe trust her judgment for once." "I'm trying to protect her from making a mistake that will bankrupt her." "You're trying to make her feel small so you can feel important," Emma shot back, and the honesty of it made Tom's face flush. Lisa stepped between them, her hands raised for peace. "Tom, I appreciate your concern, but my decision is made. The cafe opens in 2 weeks whether you approve or not." "Fine," Tom said, straightening his tie. "But when you're looking for someone to bail you out, don't call me." After he left, the energy in the room shifted back to excitement and possibility. Lisa shook off the encounter the way she'd learned to shake off his negativity, focusing, instead, on the work that remained. 2 weeks, she said, looking around the nearly finished space. "Are we really going to be ready?" "We're going to be ready," I assured her, and I meant it. The health inspection was scheduled for Monday. The final equipment deliveries would arrive Tuesday, and staff training would begin Wednesday. Everything was on schedule. That evening, after Emma had gone back to her apartment and the restaurant was quiet, Lisa and I sat at the counter sharing a bottle of wine and watching the sunset through the large front windows. The space felt magical in the golden hour light, full of potential and promise. "I keep expecting to wake up and find out this is all a dream," Lisa said, swirling wine in her glass. "It's not a dream. It's real, and it's happening because you made it happen." "We made it happen," she corrected. "I couldn't have done this without you." I thought about the woman I'd met 6 months ago, standing in her half-demolished kitchen with paint-stained clothes and tired eyes. That woman was still there, but she'd been joined by someone confident and purposeful, someone who knew what she wanted and wasn't afraid to pursue it. "You know what the best part is?" Lisa continued. "It's not just the restaurant. It's remembering who I am when I'm not trying to be what someone else wants me to be." She reached across the counter and took my hand. "And finding out what it feels like to be with someone who likes who I really am." "I love who you really are," I said, and the words felt both natural and momentous. Lisa's smile was radiant. "I love you too." The grand opening arrived on a Saturday in February, with a line of customers stretching down the block despite the February drizzle. Mrs. Rodriguez had indeed brought her book club, along with what appeared to be half the neighborhood. Emma worked the register while Lisa orchestrated the kitchen, and I handled the inevitable small crises that came with opening day. The espresso machine developed an attitude around noon, refusing to steam milk properly until I performed some mechanical magic involving a paperclip and sheer determination. The new server dropped a tray of dishes during the lunch rush, but instead of disaster, it became a moment of community as customers helped clean up while Lisa made jokes about christening the new floor. By 3 in the afternoon, we'd sold out of almost everything on the menu. Lisa emerged from the kitchen with flour in her hair and joy on her face, surveying the packed dining room with wonder. "I can't believe this is real," she said to me as we watched customers lingering over coffee and conversation. "Believe it," Emma said, joining us with the day's receipts. "We made enough today to cover rent for the next 3 months." That evening, after the last customer had left and the dishes were washed, Lisa, Emma, and I sat at one of the tables sharing leftover soup and reveling in the success of the day. Emma showed us photos she'd taken throughout the opening, candid shots of customers enjoying their meals, of Lisa laughing with regulars, of the community that had already begun forming around the copper kettle. "Look at this one," Emma said, showing us a photo of Lisa and me working together behind the counter, her calling out orders while I fixed the espresso machine. "You guys look like you've been doing this forever." Lisa studied the photo, then looked at me with an expression I'd learned to recognize as her processing something important. "David," she said, "I have an idea." "Should I be worried?" "Maybe," she grinned. "What would you think about making this official? Not just helping out when things break, but actually partnering with me. Co-owner, co-operator, full partner in all of this." The offer took my breath away. Not because I hadn't thought about it, but because Lisa was offering me exactly what I'd been hoping for without knowing how to ask. "Are you serious?" "Dead serious. You've been part of this from the beginning, and I can't imagine doing it without you. Plus, I need someone who can fix the espresso machine when it gets moody." I looked around the cafe, at the space we'd built together, at the community we'd helped create, at the woman who'd transformed her life and was offering to share it with me. "Yes," I said. "Absolutely, yes." 6 months later, the Copper Kettle had become the heart of downtown Riverside. We'd expanded the menu, hired 2 more employees, and started hosting community events in the evenings. Lisa's Comfort Food Wednesdays had become legendary, and people made reservations weeks in advance for her Sunday brunch. I'd moved into Lisa's house, bringing my tools and my quiet mornings and my genuine appreciation for her elaborate cooking projects. We'd turned the spare bedroom into a home office where we planned menus and managed the business side of the cafe, and somehow my life had expanded to include things I'd never imagined wanting. Emma graduated college that spring and moved back to Riverside to help run the cafe full-time. She brought fresh ideas and social media savvy, turning the Copper Kettle's Instagram account into a local phenomenon. Tom even grudgingly admitted that the business seemed to be succeeding, though he still predicted doom whenever given the opportunity. One evening in late July, as Lisa and I closed the cafe after a particularly busy day, she paused in wiping down tables and looked around the space with satisfaction. "Do you ever miss the simplicity of just fixing other people's broken things?" she asked. I considered the question seriously. Sometimes. But this is better. Better how? Because instead of just fixing what's broken, we're building something new, something that matters. Lisa smiled and came over to where I was counting the day's receipts. At 45, I never expected to feel this way again. What way? Like I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be, doing exactly what I'm supposed to be doing, with exactly the right person. I pulled her close, breathing in the scent of coffee and vanilla that always clung to her hair after a day in the cafe. Through the front windows, I could see the evening light settling over Riverside, people walking past with takeout containers from our kitchen, the community we'd helped nourish continuing its daily rhythm. "I love you," I said, words that had become as natural as breathing. "I love you too," she replied. "And I love our life." Our life. 6 months ago, I'd been a handyman with a truck full of tools in a quiet apartment. Now I was a restaurant, co-owner with a partner who challenged me to dream bigger, a stepdaughter who made me laugh, and a place in a community that felt like home. Sometimes the best things really do happen when you're least expecting them, when you're just showing up to fix a broken cabinet and end up fixing something in yourself you didn't even know was broken. Sometimes 45 is exactly the right time to discover that your best years aren't behind you at all. They're just beginning. And sometimes, when you're brave enough to bet on yourself and trust someone else to bet on you too, you find out that the life you thought was too good to be true is actually just the life you deserved all along. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.